Are we looking at a disaster after all? NASA experts had actually given the all-clear for the asteroid Aus and calculated that it would just miss us in 5 years. But now, a new study has led Canadian astronomer Paul Wiegert to believe that the 350-meter-large boulder could still change its trajectory and take an unfortunate detour. What are the chances that Aus will collide with a smaller object and then head our way? What would be the impact of this worst-case scenario? And if that did happen, would there be anything we could do to stop it from hitting us? On the 19th of June 2004, astronomers Roy Tucker, David J. Tholen, and Fabio Bernardi gave us two things. On the one hand, they told us about a previously unknown asteroid that was orbiting out there. On the other hand, they caused a media frenzy. The asteroid, called Apophis, made headlines as a potential killer asteroid that would come dangerously close to Earth on the 13th of April 2029, a Friday the 13th. It's fair to say that the name of the 350-meter-wide space rock doesn't inspire confidence. After all, Apophis shares its name with the ancient Egyptian god of chaos and darkness. Even without all the ominous designations, the first assessments by NASA experts raised some concerns. Based on these findings, the chance of an impact in December 2004 was estimated at 1 in 37, or 2.7%. Just to put this in context, this is the highest value for an asteroid of this size that has been reached on the Torino risk scale to date. And it's true that the impact probability at that time wasn't just for 2029, but also for 2036 and 2068. I'm sure it goes without saying that the media response to these forecasts was pretty intense. But today, 20 years later, things have calmed down again. Thanks to some in-depth follow-up studies, it's now thought highly unlikely that Aus will collide with Earth in the next 5 years. That is, unless something unexpected happens in the coming months and years that undermines all the mathematical calculations. We'll come back to that in a moment. What we do know is that the impact of Aus probably wouldn't bring about a global apocalypse, as the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs 66 million years ago did. That's because the object is simply too small for that. It's also clear that if it hits, the consequences would be huge. The researchers say the impact crater would be several kilometers wide, and the force of the collision would be so great it would devastate an area the size of Central Europe. The scientists think that Aus would release about 900 million tons of TNT's worth of energy in the process. By comparison, the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima on the 6th of August 1945 had an explosive force of only 15,000 tons of TNT. And while these figures are pretty impressive and scary, the energy of the hypothetical asteroid impact would have to be 100 times greater to destroy the entire surface of the Earth. Experts think the immediate kill zone would be about 250 kilometers wide, but the exact impact would depend on where the asteroid hits the Earth. If it hits the sea, it could create a huge tsunami more than 100 meters high. It would also kill lots of creatures in the flat areas nearby. Is there a chance that Apophis will hit Earth after all? The good news is that for now, this is just a hypothetical scenario. As we've already discussed, past trajectory observations suggest that Aus will narrowly miss Earth. The word "just" in this context means a distance of 32,000 kilometers. So in 2029, the asteroid will pass below the geostationary orbit. However, there is one small but important detail to keep in mind regarding an impact. If its trajectory stays the same, Aus will pass by Earth. The chance of a change in orbit is small, but it's not impossible. What's more, astronomers have found that the asteroid is already changing its orbit. The sun's radiation pressure is moving it by about 170 meters a year. This isn't enough to send Apophis 2029 towards Earth, but it could lead to a collision during a later passage. On a less positive note, there's also some rather unpleasant news. Even the best current projections can't rule out the possibility of Apophis being hit by a smaller asteroid. Paul Wiegert, a Canadian astronomer from the University of Western Ontario, says that if there's an impact, it could transfer enough momentum to fatally divert Aus. NASA's DART mission showed us how a celestial body can be diverted in such a scenario. As part of the mission, the DART spacecraft took on the role of a flying battering ram and hit the surface of the 1,065-meter-wide asteroid moon, Dimorphos. But while this was just a test, a push like this could have serious consequences for Australia. When might it become dangerous for us? As already mentioned, the asteroid was deflected in 2020, so it would be a good idea for the experts to keep a close eye on it. And that's exactly what they would do if they could still see it. In reality, though, Apophis has been out of our earthly view since 2021, and it won't move back into it until 2027. The reason for this is that the asteroid is currently moving close to the Sun, which is making it invisible even to the most powerful telescopes. So we don't know what's going to happen in the meantime, and we won't know to what extent it has changed its orbit until a maximum of 2 years before its flyby. Luckily, there are other ways to assess the risk of deflection besides just direct observations. Paul Wiegert has used a model simulation to analyze what exactly would have to happen for AUS to pose a danger to us. The first thing the astronomer had to do was work out how big the dangerous asteroid was. Previous studies had already shown that Apophis's orbit would have to be shifted by about 200 kilometers to allow it to enter the next keyhole. This in turn refers to a small zone near Earth where the Earth's gravitational pull would deflect AUS in 2029 enough to put our planet in its crosshairs when it next arrives in 2036. If you think it would take a full-grown colossus to guide AUS through the keyhole, think again. As it turns out, a collision with an object just 60 centimeters across would be enough. Such a collision would change the asteroid's speed by around 3/10,000ths of a meter per second, which would pave the way for the necessary shift of 200 kilometers. The situation is a bit different when we look at the potential for an impact in April 2029. For this to happen, Apophis would have to change direction by about 1/500th of a meter per second. That's a pretty small change, but it would still require a collision with an object about 3.4 meters in size. Fortunately for us here on Earth, the impact wouldn't be enough on its own. It would also have to occur at a very specific time and in a very specific direction. When it comes to probabilities and the potential for insight, there's no doubt that this is a possibility. But how likely is that to happen? Wiegert also points out that around 140 objects, each 60 centimeters wide, hit the Earth every year, while there is only one object with a diameter of 3.4 meters. If we look at the much smaller cross-section of AUS, the probability of the asteroid entering the keyhole as a result of a collision is 1 in a million. The probability of an impact in 2029 is even lower. Wiegert says it's 1 in 100 million. And since only 5% of hits from a 3.4 meter wide object give the right kind of impulse, the probability is even lower, at less than 1 in 2 billion. From a purely mathematical point of view, it seems that the risk of an impact is very manageable. But if, against all the odds, the asteroid does come into close contact with Earth, our calculations won't help us. And since this scenario can't be completely ruled out, it's really important for the experts to measure Apophis's trajectory as accurately as possible, again from February 2027, when it comes into our field of vision. A deviation of more than a few tenths of an arcsecond could indicate a disruption to its orbit. But according to Wiegert, this doesn't necessarily mean that the asteroid is on a collision course with Earth. It would be a good idea to do some more investigations and analyses. As it happens, the researchers are already working on a small satellite to accompany AUS during its Earth passage. One thing we shouldn't forget is, even though the calculations have been done, Apophis still has the potential to teach experts a lot. As this kind of approach only happens every 100 years on average, the passage also gives scientists the chance to study a near-Earth asteroid up close, which is pretty rare, and the same goes for you. As soon as AUS enters our area, you'll be able to see it as a small glowing dot in the evening sky. You can easily subscribe to our channel and never miss a new video by clicking the thumbs up button. We'll see you soon.